Okay, it's another week in our class on graduate research and design, and this week is April 10th, and we are talking this week about qualitative data analysis. So last week we had statistics, inferential, and descriptive. This week is qualitative data, and this week we are basically transitioning. So last week was about how to maybe interpret or analyze data from a quantitative research method or research study, and this one is going to be about how to analyze data from a qualitative research study. Think to yourself, which one of these methods of data analysis, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, do you think is most involved and requires the most work? If you guessed qualitative, you are correct. Qualitative data analysis requires a much more in-depth and long-term process than does quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis, you can take the numbers, you can run the stats on them, you get the answers. Qualitative, it's a lot more in depth. You have to go through the data. You have to go through the data again. You have to go through and analyze the data in multiple different ways to make connections and comparisons. So just be aware of that. That is an important understanding to have. If you do a qualitative research study, the bulk of the work really does come. Well, it comes with field studies, depending on how long you're in the field, or observations and collection of data, but it also comes with the analysis of data. So it is a much longer process overall, I believe, than quantitative research studies. So this week's activities, though, on qualitative data include chapters 19 and 20, reading and quizzes on qualitative data collection and analysis, and qualitative research data analysis. So data collection and data analysis with qualitative research. This will give those of you who are doing a qualitative study some very good information to finish out your final proposal for your research study. And last week, for those who are doing quantitative, that will help you. And so you'll complete those chapters, read those chapters, and complete those quizzes. You'll also have the quantitative and qualitative data discussion. And we're starting to wind down really with development of the proposal sections. And that will be due next week. There's a final proposal due. As you think about the data that will be collected to support your research questions, think about these questions and then respond on the discussion board. What kind of data will be collected? What will you do with the data collected? How are decisions made with the data results? In other words, how can the proposed research study that you want to do, or that you're proposing, how can that inform somebody to make a good decision? And then in your future or current professional work, how will learning about research help your decision-making process? So those are the points to talk about in the discussion for this week, and those are the activities for this week. As far as the literature review goes, I'm in the process of grading these, and so some of you may have grades already and some may not yet, and I'm still going through those. And again, as we look back on the semester, you've started with a preliminary literature review and you had a final literature review, and you've completed those now. The reason why I have such an emphasis and a focus on literature reviews really is because any research study has to build upon the foundation of a good literature review. If you do not have a good literature review before embarking on doing a research study, then you really can't be taken very seriously in the research process, because it shows that you have not done your homework. You haven't done your looking into things in a way that should be done. So that's really your gateway into doing a research study, is to have a good quality literature review. And once you have done that, then you are certified, so to speak, or you know what the topic is about, and you can now propose a good research study that actually makes sense to those who have been doing studies in that area already. And if you haven't done that, then you can't be taken seriously, or you can't be thought of as someone who can do a research study in that area with any kind of seriousness. So that's just something to be aware of. That's why I'm having you do those literature reviews. That's the importance of a literature review. And in fact, people sometimes just publish literature reviews without a research study that goes along with them. Well, it's not just a lit review, I should say. It's added on its own kind of analysis that goes beyond any previous literature review, because they are so important. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about for this week before we finish. If we go to our class in the content area, there's some sample papers. And under general class items, there's sample papers APA. I'm just going to look at this university example to remind people about APA document format once again. And once again, I didn't get a lot of this. Well, I got a lot of good APA format for document formatting, but I didn't get all of you doing a good job with this. And so, as a reminder, the first page on any APA document should have running head, just like this, and how to write a research proposal, or the title of your article, not literature review, not introduction, but it should say something about what your paper is about, whether that is teacher mentoring or art therapy. It should say something about that in all caps after the words running head, like this. And then on the right hand side should be a page number over there, although it looks like this one's over a little bit too far to the right. It's kind of outside the margin. Anyway, that's the way that goes. This is the title page. You should have a title right here, and it could, the title might take 2 lines up or 1 line depending on, and then you have your name right there, and then your Northern State University right under that for the title page. Now the location of this object here on the page is not necessarily that important. It should be somewhere in the middle of the page though. And then any of the following pages should not have the running head item, but just a caps of the same title that you had up here in the first page without running head, and then a page number after that. That's document format. Another thing to be aware of is that there should be an abstract on the second page. So it should say abstract, and then you should have the abstract that summarizes the proposal. And then on the third page is when you begin your introduction and your information, the body of the paper, I should say. You start with putting the title on here. You do not have an introduction title right here. Instead, you just begin. And again, notice that there is the how to write a research proposal in this case, or for your case, it might be vertical jump or teacher mentoring. And then the page number up there again. That's APA document format. Some of you are missing that. Quite a few of you actually are missing that. And as I go down, you can see some other elements of this document, but that's the basic APA document format that I want to remind people about. Another thing that I wanted to remind you about is to look at a sample paper here with let's take a look at this one, see if that one's going to work. Let's see if I can get into the references here a little bit more. These are references. These are not APA formatted in the fact that they are not double spaced, but when you publish an article in a journal, oftentimes the journal has their own little format that they require you to do, and so that's what I'm guessing happened here, is that the journal says, well, we're not going to do double spaced references like APA says. We want to scrunch them all down to fit them in. But the other parts of these are correct. So if you look at the author's name, then the author's last name, comma, then initials, then you have the year, and you all should know most of this if you haven't already. Then you've got the title, and then the journal that it's written in. This is a periodical, so it's written in italics. But one thing that a lot of people are missing is that the volume number, and that's the highlighted part right there, 84, that's italicized, and the issue number is not. So that's something to be aware of, and if you look at all the examples here, the volume number is italicized down here as well, the issue number is not. So just a reminder there. And then another reminder is that next week will be the final literature review proposal. The final literature review, that's already due. The final proposal for your research study. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all the feedback that I have given you in the past and update your documents that you've been handing in so far. And then you're going to add these things in: the cover page, a title, an abstract, and data analysis methods planned. So in other words, you need to have a good APA document with a cover page. The next page will have an abstract, and then you'll begin with what you've already written and include all these things that are not in bold because you've already written them. And then you're going to have the data analysis methods that are planned out. So you're going to want to take what you learned in this week and the last week on stats and on qualitative data analysis, whether your study is qualitative or quantitative, and plan the data analysis methods and put that into the paper and make a plan for those. So you want to make sure that you're updating and not updating, but learning the things that you need to learn about data analysis this week and saying, hey, that's a method that I want to do in my study, and writing about that for next week. So that'll be due at the end of next week, after this week is over, at the very end of next week anyway. You want to submit that. And that's your final research proposal that you'll submit, and then you'll have a few other assignments due after that, but that's kind of the big push for the proposal is finished by next week. All right, that's about it for this week, so have a great week.